Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Denise and I'm an amateur for life, and I am someone who's in a relationship. If you clicked on this video, you might be in a relationship or pursuing a relationship or have been participating in a relationship for a length of time. So are you currently someone who's in a relationship that kind of seems to be stuck in between? I'm referring to is specifically finding yourself in between leveling up or staying where you are. And of course, that's just part of a relationship overall and can vary again depending on where you find yourself in your life. And so you might be exploring and dating. I'll leave it up to you to define it so that there's space for you to kind of interpret it your own way. Maybe you're someone who enjoys labeling a relationship or establishing exclusivity or starting to introduce them to your friends, deciding whether you're going to bring them to family events, kind of leveling up in the ways that are most important to you. Or you can be someone who is in a long-term relationship. You could be with them for a few different years. Age could vary here in this example, but you've been dating them for a year, 2 or 3, and you've decided to take the next step. Again, this could vary depending on who you are. In this scenario, you are dating this person and have been for a few years, and now the next step is moving in together. Or it could be that you are now thinking about marriage. Or if you're married and or establishing and let's say engaged, for example, you could be incorporating your finances together. Next step, the leap, could mean so many different things for you. For myself, and why I'm talking about this subject is I currently find myself in a long-term relationship. We've been together for over 3 years, and we dated very intentionally when we found each other. So we knew that we both wanted to pursue marriage and children down the road. So we knew that we were dating essentially for what we defined as for keeps. Fast forward 3 years, and now we're living together. And now here's the thing. We have hit a place in our relationship where we haven't gotten to an engagement yet. So it's brought up some turmoil and for me, anxiety and a lot of different things in between there. You can insert your experience here, and we're really looking at just the in-between of something that's ambiguous. The example that I'll go ahead and throw in here is for people who find themselves in a what next phase. So I'm specifically thinking about people who are in between deciding to stay together or to separate. And again, this can mean so many different things based off of you and your current experience. The one that I've seen the most lately is couples who find that their goals, their overall independent goals, are not aligned with one another anymore, but there's a wonderful relationship in place. There is nothing wrong with it, and there's nothing that will, really is in the way other than they don't have the same end goal. It could be that one person they both initially started with the same idea of what their futures would look like, and then one person over time evolves or changes and wants something different, while the other person kind of is and has really always been about the end goal that they expressed. This could be someone who, let's say neither of them wanted marriage, but now one of them does, or they both wanted marriage, but one of them wanted children and the other one doesn't. I've seen that a few different times where there are people who love each other, they're committed to one another, but their end goals no longer align. They did at one point, but they don't anymore. This is really an acknowledgement video because no one, in my opinion, really talks about these kind of scenarios of in between. And the only reason I say that is because as soon as one person in my life started talking about it, Another person in my life decided they would share. Another person in my life came out and said, we're having difficulties. And these are people who love each other. So some of them we had no idea. Others kind of, had expressed these concerns and changes along the way. But there is a lot of in between in relationships because we're individuals. And again, this is a monogamous example. There are so many different definitions and dynamics that go into relationships. Of course, you can kind of expand it based off of your experiences too. So if you're someone who finds yourself in this kind of ambiguous place, and you clicked on this video, it's probably creating what it has been creating for me and the people around me in these similar scenarios, and that is probably a lot of anguish, worry, anxiety, and sometimes maybe even despair, because there's something to be said about a relationship that there's nothing that you would change about it except for that one thing. I just want to kind of put that out there because people will openly share milestones that they hit with their partner or in their world, but you don't talk about that in between that is really difficult until you hit that stage. And for me, in my case, it's engagement and getting ready to get married. So if you find yourself in this crossroads and you're hoping essentially for some clarity here and maybe some help with making a decision, I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm not here to convince you or change your mind or give you bullet points. What I'm going to encourage you to do is what I have done, and that is do nothing right now. So again, if you're feeling this anxiety or uncertainty, and that's creating maybe some despair, maybe some anxiety, maybe some anguish, it's time to do nothing. For me personally, when the question came up, and that's going to be a suggestion later, but when the question came up between me and my partner of what comes next, and he told me that essentially, he was not sure about what we define as marriage anymore, for many different reasons. I might get into that later. But once he told me that, I kind of went and, I went through a loop and I said, well, if this has changed, then I know the logical thing to do is to just end it, right? And find someone who is in line with my end goals. And that thought alone brought heartache, because similar to the scenarios I've explained before, there's nothing that I would change about my relationship. I mean, there are one or two things, right? But nothing major that I would change, because I'm overall happy. It's just right now where he found himself in terms of questioning what it looks like, and where I found myself in terms of certain of taking this next step didn't align. So what did I do? I panicked. And of course, then I start sounding the alarm, reaching out to friends, really good friends who while they're close to me, can give an impartial opinion for support. I talked to everybody and they gave me some support. It wasn't until I finally had the courage to ask someone, a really good friend of mine, what do I do? What do I do now? And she said, nothing. And in fact, two people gave me this advice, kind of back to back actually, in separate scenarios, but they said, do nothing. And one of them clarified, and she said, because I haven't heard that he explicitly does not want to marry you yet, or at all. I heard that he is figuring it out. It might need a little extra time. But for me, a little extra time could mean so many things, right? And of course, that didn't ease my concerns. But what it did ease was the anxiety that came with, do I make a decision right here and now? And so my recommendation for you in this situation is right now to do nothing. Because what you're gonna do next is you're gonna evaluate and analyze a few different things. So we're gonna break this down a little bit. And first and foremost, let me just go ahead and say that it is okay to do nothing, and it is okay to have no answer, and it is also okay to not actually want to make a decision, and it is okay to not listen to the noise about what goes into where you kind of have to go from here. Now, I am going to put a disclaimer here and say that there are exceptions to this recommendation that I'm giving, and that is for people who are currently and knowingly or maybe have an inkling that there could be harm expressed, created explicitly or theoretically that could come to you or someone else in this situation. That is the exception. So if you know that there is a chance that you or someone you know or is in your life could be harmed, before you make a decision, you need to make a change as soon as possible and find help, assistance, and a plan to help you get there. That kind of information can be found, and I'm going to try and find some recommendations for it just because I put a mention for it already out there. And by the way, harm to yourself could be in any realm. It could be financially, physically, emotionally. It could be to a family member, of course, sexually, and many more definitions. But it doesn't have to look one way or another for you to decide to change. But I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, so now that we've kind of set that framework, I want to go ahead and say this is not a video that's going to give you 3 ways to change someone's mind or 3 ways to get the end result that you want, because I found that as much as those videos have a place and their recommendations are valuable, in this kind of scenario, you kind of have to take a bird's eye view of everything to really make a decision. And of course, you can include some of those recommendations that you see out in the world, but it's not a strategic video that's gonna help you get to a decision or change your mind or tell you what's right in your world. It's more of a video that's gonna, one, acknowledge that you're not the only one out there. People just don't talk about it as freely until they feel safe with the people who are talking about it, or they hear finally the example that they've been going through, or finally one of their other friends has said something that they've been thinking this whole time, or they're going through with their partner. It's vulnerable to share this kind of thing, and not a secret in my life, so I'm totally fine making this video right now, but I have to discuss it before posting with my partner. And just know that it's not as easy to talk about in bigger groups, because for some people, it's hard to admit that something is really difficult. And for others, it might be that they really just need to kind of figure it out on their own. Everyone does things their own way. It is more of a, let's kind of hold space for this, and then hopefully that'll give you the insight you need to make a next step, whatever that looks like for you. When you take that first step of doing nothing, that's going to help you have the space so that you can kind of co-create with what you want to do. So in my scenario, for example, it felt as though, and I say this because some of this has been processed already, and we kind of find ourselves in a slightly different space. But when it first happened, it felt as though all of the control and decision making went directly to my partner, which I didn't want to feel, right? Because I knew what I wanted, and this person said that they knew what they wanted, but now is saying that it's not on the same timeline to start. And so it felt as though now something was taken out of my wheelhouse. And it wasn't until we went to couples therapy where we kind of expressed all of this, and our couples therapist explained I was giving a lot of power and decision making to my partner. And although he had a different timeline and I knew what I wanted, ultimately, I still had just as much power in the decision of what comes next with us. So it was a little bit of navigating in that way. But if you do nothing for a while, you can kind of really sit back and understand and give yourself space to kind of see what is happening for you and also your partner. We're going to start with ourselves because that is going to give us the best ability to create the outcome that's best going to serve us. And we're not going to do this, 3 things and tips to like make someone change their mind or get the end goal that you want, because I've seen those videos too. Essentially, it's a way for us to feel like we have control. And yes, we have influence and control on how we behave, but not in terms of how someone else reacts. And I'm specifically thinking for my specific scenario, but you can apply it for yours, where I've seen videos that are how to get him to propose, or how to get him to take the next step, or why he's not proposing. And I've watched those videos because I was genuinely curious and wondering, what are these girls doing? And each one have their place in terms of, yes, you have to establish what you want and don't want. You have to make sure that you are not letting someone just like make the decision for you and then take advantage of all the things that come with being in a relationship with you, and you never get to the end goal that you want. Absolutely. Or, don't date for a really long time, but don't establish your particular wants and needs and then wonder why this isn't changing. Great. I love those very logistical or tangible suggestions. But what do you do when there is a healthy relationship with its own like setbacks and stuff? What do you do then? And what do you do if you are not someone who feels that things like withholding intimacy or not moving in with the partner isn't for you? Because myself, for example, I did want to live with my partner before we got engaged, because what if I didn't like him once we moved in together? What if I no longer actually liked him as a person because he was really messy? It was not something that I wanted to explore down the road if we were compatible, not just at home, but in other ways. This includes finances as well. I didn't want to discover that after the fact, after signing very official documents that acknowledge that we are a union and then have potential long-term detrimental impacts, not just on my finances, but my being or my safety, for example, because things change, people change, and things, you learn over time as well. How was I going to learn as much as I could if I didn't explore some of those things in my way? And so I just want to say, we're not going to touch those. Again, they have their place. They're out there. Explore as you feel comfortable. We're going to try our best to do so in our way. So a few things were very helpful for me in this journey. So I had, of course, a wonderful network of friends and family. And also we had a couples therapist. And not only that, but we both have our own independent therapist. So we had a lot of moving pieces. My partner also took an extra step and participated in coaching. So a relationship coach. He was trying to figure out what was the thing that was impeding him from feeling like he was presently ready, and why, how could he kind of navigate the questions he was having about marriage and how you define it and what that means. So he did that. And if you're listening, you're like, my partner isn't doing that, don't panic, okay? Because one, it could be an access thing. You could have someone who is doing the work to try and figure out how to get and align with each other again, and it just doesn't look like that, and that's okay. I want to put that out there, because sometimes I feel like I watch a video, and if they sound very similar to me, I'm like, all right, tell me what you're doing, and then I hear something that has like a different world from what I have, and I become discouraged. But I don't want you to feel that way, because again, you can have a perfectly capable person who is willing and present and participating in the relationship, positive sign there, and may not do what I just described, but is doing it in their own way. we are going to start taking an active role in determining what it means for you to take this next step. So I give you my example, but just know that you can insert your own and really think about, for him, for me, what this means. And start with yourself, and what do you think the next step means? What do you think it means to, in my case, want to be engaged, which then of course means want to be married? What does that mean for me? What does that overall describe? What feeling does that create for me that I want? For me, it's more about like a long-term commitment and the establishing of it, or the declaration. For me, the declaration with the engagement specifically, it's the declaration that this is long-term. Fully aware that people break off engagements too, but this is just where my brain goes. This is why it's important to me. It's kind of like a symbolic declaration. Now, in kind of thinking about that and kind of getting to that answer, I also learned and kind of came to my own realization that timeline could be a two-way street, right? Like it doesn't have to be on my timeline. It could be on both of our timelines. And we are going to have to kind of meet ourselves in the middle. And that's one of the hard things about relationships, is that you have to realize, and I think you realize this over and over and over and over again, that you are constantly meeting each other halfway. Like you can't fully have everything the way you want it, because the other person has their own dynamic internal world too. I also asked myself and learned, what do I want a relationship to look like? What do I want my current relationship to continue to look like while we kind of figure this out? What do I need for myself to feel safe in this? And how do we know where we're going from here? And also, what are my boundaries in terms of what comes next? Because I am fully aware that you can make a decision to be with someone for a while. And this is again why I say do nothing for a little bit, because you can always make the decision otherwise. And you don't want to make a decision too quickly and regret it later. Unless, of course, one, you're in danger and feel as though this needs to change immediately, or two, you have kind of always known that you needed to walk away, even if there's nothing else going on that gives you concern. And then you're going to think and wonder and establish why you are with this person to begin with. Because you can be with someone and you no longer appreciate them, want them, even like them. You could not like someone and be with them for a really long time. So acknowledging what it is about them that you want in your life is going to help you to stay with them, if you want to do that. And if not, it'll help you down the road in establishing characteristics that you want and need in your life for yourself. And also, what do you want your relationship to look like overall? What in an ideal world do you want to happen? And now we've taken away now that like for myself, let's use me as an example again. When I realized that I wanted the more symbolic declaration of a long-term relationship, I also realized that there were less declaratory, is that a word? Kind of establishing of relationships for me and him that were as important, if not more so, than the act of him getting on one knee and proposing to me and then us announcing it to everybody. For me, it is a commitment, and I noticed this one later, that he was showing up for therapy. He was showing up for couples therapy. He was showing up for his own therapist. But on the other end, like I said, don't panic. On the other end, he was still doing our laundry. I fold the laundry, but he'll do it. And honestly, I hate doing that part, so it works out. But he would make me hot chocolate from scratch. It takes like 20 minutes. He would do that. He would do things like that. He would make me tea, or he'd do things that I really like. Acts of service. That for me is a big one. And he would still show up even when he was wondering, what does this mean for me? And what do I want? And when do I want it? And like, can we take that next step together? Are we there yet? So these things, these like little things that mean really big things for you are kind of pinging you in the way that a declaration would, again, in my case, then that is something to keep in mind as well. Someone told me, and someone has mentioned, that not every relationship that has what you want or takes the step that you are hoping for is as fulfilling or as safe as where you currently find yourself. So something to think about, because you can have someone who is fully engaged or married, or they have exactly what you're hoping for, and they are not working out. It just appearances. Also, I want to place some alternatives out there, because what I have seen has been so helpful. And when I started talking about this, I again found out how common it was. And I've also heard from people who went through this stage, some for years. So if you hear someone say or comment that, if he doesn't propose to you or get married with you now, 4 years into the relationship, he's never going to do it. Just so you know, I know at least 2 people, no, 3 actually. There's been a lot of proposals lately, which is crazy. I'm really happy for them. But I know 2 people who have been with their partner for 10 plus years, and they didn't get engaged at the time for 7 plus years, but they didn't get engaged until then. And they're still super happy, and they have children, and they wouldn't change the way they had everything kind of unfold for them. And also, I know of someone like adjacently, I'm not that close to this person, but I know them and their personality. And so it was a complete shock when he went and proposed to his person. So in this example, this person is a full-grown adult, like in their 40s, found a partner. They had a child. After that, they bought a house. And after that, he proposed to her. Like the child is 2, and the house is, they've had it for at least a year. But they're engaged. And she said yes. So it happens. These things happen. They don't happen the way everyone thinks they do, and the formulas that they want to give you, again, have their place and strategy and are helpful, but aren't always addressing all the dynamics that are out there. So some alternatives that I have since learned about in these conversations with multiple people who have gone through what I'm presently going through. One alternative that I've learned is the person might not financially be prepared to propose to you. I know in my personal life of at least past and present, by the way, people who I know have already either they're currently married or anything that you were thinking about, or they're like still dating them, right? But that person, and I know that these are more heteronormative examples, but bear with me. The person in the partnership that felt like they had the most masculine energy felt as though they needed to be financially stable before they were able to propose. And that looked in these examples very differently for each one. So one person was a very financially stable, but also just ready to do it, just like take the plunge and propose. One person was like in a whole degree, and it wasn't until they graduated, got their first job, and then spent some time in that job that they were finally able to feel safe enough and that they could provide to propose. And in another scenario, I know that the person they did a really grand gesture. So this is me hypothesizing, but this person, it felt like they wanted to make it a big grand thing and wanting that to kind of be a little more settled and managed before they kind of take that next step with the person. Another example or another alternative that I can give you is sometimes not everyone's experience with something or the end goal that you want is positive. And that's something that I learned in my own scenario, not only as he has been exploring his, but as I've been exploring and questioning what these things mean to me too. And for me and him, what we have in common is that we saw in our family and the dynamics that we see with marriage, we didn't see all positive. And we saw dynamics that we didn't want for ourselves. And that doesn't mean there was anything wrong with them, but the examples that we were given weren't the most positive always, in ways that would make anybody question if that's something they want for themselves. It could be that there's kind of this reestablishing of what that means and what that person wants from it, and maybe how they want it to look different. And another alternative I thought about is, what if that person is already planning this? It could be. It could be that that person has already begun to plan it and wants to do it in their own way. And like the person who I know did a really big gesture could be waiting for something like that to kind of unfold. And of course, sometimes just life gets in the way. I gave the example of the couple where I knew that one of them was in a graduate program and they had to graduate, then pass an exam actually, and then after that get a position. And after that, of course, get to a place where they felt like they were ready to provide and be able to provide for this person who's been in their life for many years. And, you know, I smile because life happens and we can't see it coming. In all of the stuff that could happen in life, people still love each other. There's still love, there's still care, there's still support. Even if you're wondering if this is something you can't be a part of anymore, that doesn't mean you don't love somebody in it. Sometimes things happen in life that can be so heartbreaking that they sidetrack everything. And my couples therapist was explaining that giving or expecting a timeline, she was talking to me, expecting a timeline or something like, let's say, an ultimatum, these things are not, one, helpful, and two, don't usually work, because even if this person was going to get there in that timeline, what if something happens where that person's family member gets sick? Or in my scenario, what if someone in my family gets sick? You might not care about that thing you wanted so much, but that person might be there for you throughout it all, you know? And hopefully that's not the case, nor does that happen, but just keep in mind that sometimes life can get in the way too, but it doesn't mean it's never going to happen. Okay. So I tell you this only because I also am going through this. I am still in the midst of it. We are still working through some things. It's not perfect, and I'm probably not going to share this for a while and see where it goes. But I wanted to put that out there for when I am ready to share, because I know while I'm going through this, I know I'm not the only one going through it. So if anybody has any advice, please share down below. If you have experiences that you want to share, maybe so that other people can know they're not alone. And of course, if you have anything that you wanted to add, recommend, or just let me know about, then please do. If there's anything I talked about that you wanted me to kind of expand on, I'm happy to just kind of see where that can take us. And of course, I want everyone to kind of learn from one another, because I'm going through this for the first time. I don't know what it looks like. And I want to see where it takes me and my partner, but also where it can take me, and also where it can take a community of people for being there for one another and learning from each other in this process. Well, thank you again for watching. Please like and subscribe if you appreciated this video information. Let me know what it is that you liked and what works. I'll see you again in the next one. Thank you guys. Bye.